Okay, it's time for another part of texturing, and we're back at my huge chassis texture. I want to try and improve the dirt and everything on this texture a little bit, because as I said, it bothers me a little bit that it doesn't look as strong yet as it should. I'm trying to increase the contrast on the sponge overlay layer a little bit. And I want to see if maybe I should brighten the specular a little bit, make it a bit more contrasted so the speculars look better. I'm gonna go back to the diffuse now and change the colors there a little bit also. And picking another cloudy dirt brush. They're all really big. I'm trying to reduce them in size a little bit. I'm just looking for a specific one. This doesn't look too good either. When you have these brushes, it's just a matter of finding the one that's right. Like I said, I'm being really picky here and just trying lots of different ones. You also have to watch out that some of these E3D brushes, they use both the foreground as the background color, so I'm painting in black and white. Not always sure if you want to do that. So, just painting some more dirt in certain areas. The exhaust also. And again, I'm using the Ambient Occlusion as a guide for where to paint my dirt. And this is on a new layer, it's called Grit 2. I'm just creating new layers for every type of dirt that I think is different. And I loaded up some new brushes. These are brushes I got from a friend. There's a few interesting ones in here. I want to add some more visual interest onto the exhausts also. I'm trying to see if this brush. The problem with these brushes is that although they're good, they have these corners where they were cut out of a photograph, and that makes their usefulness, greatly reduces their usefulness. Yeah, these are cool for sort of splotches and splatters on something, like, I don't know, drips of oil, caked on mud that came off and changed the color a little bit. And again, just keeping it subtle. I'm keeping it subtle, but I'm adding lots of layers, lots of subtle ones will result in the end in a texture that's interesting enough. Don't just try and put all your dirt into one single texture and make it really obvious. I'm just trying to do different types with different brushes. It's just gonna look more interesting and more believable. And really just trying all these different brushes to get some variation in there. Really just experimenting a lot with different brushes that I could use. These other ones I'm using, the Doyle brushes by my friend, they don't tend to be so universally applicable because they don't have any scattering or rotation randomness. Most of them are just stamps. So yeah, what I'm doing now, this is a really cool trick, which I learned from the same friend that the brushes came from. I create a new layer with a brown orange tint. I apply a sponge on it, but the sponge has to be like really strong. I'm actually even doing two, a small scale one and a big scale one, and then you get this, well, it looks like rust. I put a mask on that rust layer, and the mask is completely colored black. And then I go back and I pick my scratch brush here, the scratch brush which I showed you how I created. That's just a default chalk brush in Photoshop. And then with that brush as white I start painting onto the mask, which makes the rust appear on top of the metal. You can do it the other way around also. You can put the metal on top of the rust and then paint black on the mask of the metal. But with this case, with my layer ordering, it's easier to do it the other way around. And then all you do is you just paint little squiggles like you did with the scratches. You paint these little squiggles around the areas that are darker, that would accumulate more water, where it would just rust more. And I'm thinking here, combining rust and scratches. Maybe it's not all that logical, so I'm trying to refrain a little bit from it. Also, I'm thinking that not because, you know, rust is really like a favorite thing for beginning texture artists to add to their textures. Is I'm really not going overboard with this. I'm actually trying to add as little of it as possible, trying to be really subtle. It's only going to rust in a few places. Don't want the car to be an absolute clunker about to fall apart. I'm just adding a little bit of it because, like some slight surface rusted scratches. Like nothing that can be repaired with a bit of sandpaper. So you see, I'm just looking for the areas where two parts are protruding into each other, where two parts meet, where it would just make sense to have some rust. Some areas don't make sense to have rust. For example, the brake rotors. They can have rust, but as soon as you brake with them, all the rust gets scraped off by the brake pads. So I'm not going to add rust there. It doesn't make sense. This is a part at the bottom of the frame, and I'm adding a little bit more there because, like I said, all the water drips down, and the frame tends to be close to the ground, so it'll just make more sense. Not too sure what that part is, but. And yeah, the frame, like I said, needs a little bit more rust than other parts. But still, I'm not gonna go overboard with it. So as you can see, all I'm doing here, you can see the layer mask update a little bit. I'm just painting white onto the mask, which makes the rust appear. A little bit of rust scratches into the exhaust. Switching to a slightly smaller brush also. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm adding an outer glow to that layer, and that outer glow is going to be orange, and it's going to be really blurry and faded. And what that does is it creates, you have two types of rust. You have like sort of peeled off noisy rust, and then you have the really smooth surface rust that tends to be lighter in color. And I'm simulating that with a layer style, an outer glow layer style. This outer glow layer style just tends to recreate that effect pretty well. It's also a trick I learned from my friend Doyle. So thanks for that to him. Okay, so I'm putting that the rust layer onto the specular folder. like if I create a new layer in my diffuse now, I immediately duplicate it to my specular, because this thing is all metal. I think it's so important that I get this right. I want to work on specular and diffuse at the same time. I want the two layers to communicate well. I want it to just, yeah, it's important that it works well. So I'm immediately updating both, and I changed the rust to black, so because rust doesn't reflect any light at all. And the engine obviously doesn't have any rust yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to add any to it. And what I'm thinking now is the rust was okay. Maybe I'll add some more later, but that's well. I want to do the interior. I want to do the gauges and the steering wheel and everything, because that's part of this texture as well. Some of the interior is part of the body texture, but the steering wheel and everything, that is part of the chassis texture. So the wood on the steering wheel, that's different than other parts. It's not metal, it's wood, like I just mentioned. So it's gonna have to be a little bit different in my texture in regard to how I handle it. So I'm filling this with a brown base color, and I'm picking this. I'm gonna see if I can paint the wood myself. Picking this sort of rake type of thing, and trying to paint the how do you say that, the grain in the wood by doing circular motions. I'm just looking for a brush I can use to paint the grain in the wood. I'm just drawing these lines around. You know, for wood normally I would use a photograph, even though I haven't used any photographs up until now. But I'm not going to do it here because I'm pretty sure I won't be able to find a photograph of wood with a circular grain. So I'm just manually painting some lines in there with a circular motion. I'm using darker and lighter ones, which I think is pretty important. As soon as I start adding the darker ones, it starts to look better. So if you are painting wood, you just use a small brush. I'm using a 3-pixel brush here with a low flow. I prefer to turn down the flow instead of the opacity, and paint motions in the direction that you want the wood grain to go. And I'm not sure if you call this grain even. I can't figure out the word. And then just use different colors. Use lighter tints of your base color. Use darker tints, and I'm going to see what it looks like now. Yeah, that looks pretty good actually. The specular is even working pretty well. It looks like the sort of veneered wood that I could see on the photographs. Yeah, now I'm just adding a slight noise to get some more detail in there. And now I'm going to select out the center part of the steering wheel, which is going to be dark gray, because that's where you're gonna what you're gonna hit if you want to honk the car's horn. And I'm painting like a slight fake specular highlight in there, because I want to fake the fact that it sort of looks around. See, look, that's looking a lot better already. Not just a solid color, just paint some lighting in there, doing it subtle. And I want to have an inverted cross in there. And I'm going to put a bevel and emboss on that. And I'm just playing with these values to fake the look of that cross. See, that's when bevel and emboss is useful, when you want to do these really pixel perfect fake embossed or beveled areas, just like the name says. Actually, I'm painting some fake highlights on the top of the steering wheel center. Because ambient occlusion contains shadow information but doesn't contain specular information, so that's why I feel I have to paint some more of that. Also, take note, I've created a new folder, interior stuff, in which I'm doing all the stuff for the interior, logically. But that means I can just easily collapse that folder and get those layers out of view so they don't bother me. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw the pattern of the gears on there. Not really sure what you would call that in English, but it's just it shows the pattern that you have to follow with your hand to engage the car into gear. It's looking a little bit messy. So looks like it's a 5-speed. I don't know if there's reverse in there, probably. So it's a 4-speed with the reverse. Yeah. And placing the interior stuff on top of the... Yeah, so what I just did is I duplicated the interior stuff to my specular, and then I inverted the color of the wood. Why am I inverting the color of the wood? I've inverted the color of the wood because if you use the inverse of the diffuse color, you get pure white specular. If you don't do that, you get a slight color in your specular, which suggests a more metal material. Because I'm creating wood here, I want a pure white specular, and as you can see, the specular is looking a lot more white, while before it was more yellow. And you can see some blue highlights, but that's just because there's a blue light in my scene. Okay, so a few things I've created. I want to get the opacity map for some of these things in here. Like I have these springs, I have the grille in the front, and I have the sort of spokes for the steering wheel, and all those pieces need occlusion with well, occlusion. They need to have an opacity map so you can see through them. Okay, so I created this one. Duplicate that. See, I'm just trying to fill up all the places that will need this. Okay. I can't forget to duplicate it a little bit more so I can get the slight edges out of there also. Now I'm deleting the parts I don't need, like that. And those black parts will all be see-through in my opacity map. So I'm grabbing all those layers together and created a new layer called opacity. And the opacity in my shader has to sit in the alpha channel of the diffuse, so that's what I did. But I'm keeping it as a separate layer also, because if I would keep it in the alpha channel only, it would be easy to get rid of it, because as I said, I sometimes store selections in the alpha channel. So that looks pretty cool. trying to see what it looks like from a distance, getting a little bit of a feel for it. Just looking all over the object if I see places that I can improve or work on. Okay, so here's what I want to do next. I want to work on the gauges of my car. This is going to be cool. I like doing this. It's a fun, rewarding area to do. You can get some detail in there. Create a new layer of gauges, and I could create these from scratch, but I prefer looking for images to use. So the gauge that shows you the speed is called the speedometer, and I want this sort of classic look, like it really fits into a hot rod. No crazy digital displays or anything special. Yeah, these look like they could fit. So I'm just going to copy this image so I can cut them out. And creating a new file and pasting them in there. I want to do this in a new file just so I don't clutter my actual texture with all this junk. Gauges classic, and well, these look even better. Those Chevy gauges. This font is too modern. I don't want to use that. There's not exactly more in there. I just keep looking for if I find some interesting images. Not really. I'd looked at these before. Hot rod gauges. You also need to try and find images that you can use for your textures. Yeah, these actually look pretty good. I'm gonna copy these. They look just right. Okay, so now I'm just gonna cut these out. Again, I'm using Alt and then drag to select these gauges. Alt drag and then I hit Shift so I select perfectly round shapes. And then I duplicate that layer to a new layer using Control J. That's what Control J is pretty good for. And then I duplicate that layer to the chassis texture layer. And look at that, even the size is like almost perfectly right. Oh, and I selected a little bit too much. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my textures into the correct position, and then I will duplicate that mesh of the gauge and adjust the UV coordinates so they sit in the correct position. So I have these nice gauges. That means I'm going to create 5. I have 1. I'll just have to reuse what I have there. And I'm just placing them in open positions. It doesn't really matter. Using an unsharp mask just so they become a little bit sharper. I also did a reduced noise on there because there was some noise. It helps too. Okay, so what I need to do now is on my ambient occlusion, obviously the areas where there was no texture yet, I need to duplicate. So placing these on top of each other. There we go, that one matches nicely also. And then duplicate that one over there. Merge all of them down. And then I have to set the layer style, the layer blend mode and the opacity to the same value before I merge them, and then go back to the normal value. Because if you merge something down on a layer that's on a multiplier with opacity 30, sort of like you'll lose the fact that you set it to that opacity. It'll be completely gone. Also, that special color burn layer that I had, I have to remove that and do it again. And I'm taking my gauges into my specular also, desaturating them and filling them with white just because I want them to reflect a lot. So I'll save this diffuse and save the specular also. Yeah, I just saved the spec, now I'm saving the diffuse. There we go, 32 bits, because if you don't set it to 32 your opacity maps will be gone, and that looks pretty cool. So what I gotta do now is I'm gonna unhide the body so I can see where I want to duplicate these gauges. Yeah, that looks cool. Now I'm going to duplicate these two. Now I'm going to edit these two first. And I want to select that center part and set it to the correct texture. So you see, that's something you need to do if you want to share textures. You have to model it before you unwrap it and create the texture before you even start changing it. That's how I prefer to do this. And the specular value on them also looks nice. So I collapse the unwrap to save things, and then duplicate these two small ones. Set this to the diffuse again. Turn off vertex snap because it was doing some annoying snapping. See, it's still doing it. I don't get it. I'm trying to see if I can turn that off. I have no idea why it's doing that. You see how the verts are jumping around? I never turned that on myself. So I'm just going to see if vertex edge snap, everything off. And let's see if that's better. And it's doing it again. There seems to be some sort of bug where this gets turned on by itself. I think it depends on the fact that I'm using... See, it doesn't do it when I'm using this texture. I think it's probably snapping to a pixel or something. But I have no idea where that setting is because I never turn it on myself. So what I have to do here is I have to do it without looking. Turn off the texture, slightly scale it, check back, and I can't move it for a tiny bit or it gets distorted. Yeah, that looks okay. I have to do the same thing there, and I'm gonna just do the scale by comparing it to the other one. I know this is a really retarded way of working, but I have no idea what happened here. It seems to be only happening in this object also, and this object's in wrap modifier. So there we go, I created my gauges. I think those gauges were pretty fun to create. I mean, it's small detail, it's not so hard to add. Really makes things pop out more. Painting dirt all the time can get boring, so it's nice to be able to paint something like that for a change. I'm just looking around and trying to see what I'm going to tackle next. Looking at the interior. You might be thinking I'm leaving the rest of the steering wheel just as solid gray, but probably the reflections are going to do a lot there. If you can see the interior, I don't want to make the interior rusted and dirty. I want to keep that rather clean. It can look a little bit worn, but I don't want to go too far there. So I know what I'm going to do next. This is going to be a fun one also. I want to get the brake lights and the indicator lights on there. And I'm doing the same thing, just looking for a hot rod, tail light, brake light, whatever, seeing if I can find a good straight-on picture of a round tail or brake light from a classic American car. For hot rod rear light, but I'm not finding so much classic rear light. It's all the same where it exactly comes from. You have to be a little bit creative with your search terms. The best thing for this is just to have a straight-on picture with not too much lighting and reflections in there, and with a decent resolution and some decent contrast. Also, you should prefer not to have the light on, so the light isn't burning. Looking for T-bucket rear light, because I'm not really finding anything, but I have to find something because I've done this stuff before. I've painted this from scratch, this sort of lights, and that's extremely difficult. I mean, it takes like half an hour to just paint a tiny 30 by 30 pixel square. It's really, really difficult. Also, you have to think a lot about how the reflections, the refractions, the color distortions, how is it all going to work. I want something like on that picture, and apparently I found this site here, which I've been to before. Years back when I was creating some other hot rod cars, Taillight King, and this Taillight King guy, he has something excellent. This is just what I need. It looks simple, it's round, it's exactly what I need. And I'm gonna paint some of his reflections away. I want to select those little bold areas along with it, because it's going to make things more believable if I create those also. So then I create a new one and call it lights and paste. And look at that, that's pretty high res. That's kind of nice that it's such a high resolution. I can really use that. Maybe it's even a little bit too big, but then again, you can always use sharpen to fix that sort of stuff. So I scale it, get it into the correct position. Yeah, something like that. Get a little bit smaller, enter. And now put an unsharp mask on it, but the unsharp mask has to be pretty strong, and that just tends to pop out the details more, make things a little bit more crisp. I'm looking for some more lights on this website, because I want to find an orange one now. The red one, well, it looks perfect, but I want to see if there's something like an orange light here that I can use. I know some of them look orange, but if the lights are burning, red ones might have a slight orange tint. Nah, this one has too much reflections. I think I'll see if it works, but nah, I can't use that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to do a hue saturation adjustment to get it to orange. Okay, that looks really cool. Some bright colors in my car. Saving that as a TGA. And I switched them around. And they're obviously a little bit too big. They need to be smaller. Which is a bit of a bummer because I already rescaled them and did the unsharp mask. So I'm going to lose some accuracy if I rescale them like this. But, well, it's not too bad. So I rescale them, and immediately I apply the unsharp mask again. It's really important. Yeah, that looks like it should. And there's a little bit of a jagged pattern on the normal map there. Well, first I'm duplicating the lights into the specular map. Why am I doing that? Because obviously they need to have a lot more specular than the metal, because they're shiny plastic. Well, not more, but it's just got to be different. Erasing those little bolt areas because, well, they got to work the same as the metal. Those bolt areas, screw areas, they're screws, sorry. And then turning this into a very bright color. And what I need to do now is get a little bit of this information from the lights back into the normals. So you can see one of them has this really ugly, oh god, what is that? Sort of N-gon pattern around it. So I'm erasing the screws. And what am I doing now? I want to put I want to blur these. What does that mean if I blur them? That'll mean that means they'll get like their height map. They'll sort of slope down towards the outsides. So doing height to normals, and looks pretty sweet like this. And just to save my PSD file in size, I'm going to delete everything around them because you don't need all that extra pixel information. And I'm erasing those ugly edges on that part because it looked really bad. So there we go. I'm gonna save that normal, and I bet this is gonna look a lot better already. Yeah, look at that. Well, I really like how the normal map is actually making them pop out. Oh, look at that. Great success. Ha! This was a fun part to work on, I think. I always like doing these small details. Maybe because they're from photos and it's less work, but then again, my mission tends to be try and keep my textures like 85–90% hand painted and don't rely on photos too much. Cool. That looks excellent. So we've worked on those details, and I'm just checking them out a bit more. It's always fun to look at what you just created. Thinking what I should try doing next. I think I might want to do the opacity map for the car's grille. And this is just a lot of stupid work, just shift clicking to select entire rows of pixels all the time. Not much I can do about that. I'll select all, what is it, 30, 50? Okay, so all of these are selected. Now I want to deselect the parts that are not necessary. There we go. Now I only have that selected. Go back to my opacity map. Fill that stuff with black. And I think 1 pixel is going to be too small. You won't be able to see what it is. So I'm using a stroke of 1 pixel on them to essentially turn their size into the same as the white parts. So 3 pixels wide where you can see through, and 3 pixels wide for where you can't see through. So that looks better also. I think the grille is one of the most obvious examples of where it's a big advantage to use Photoshop generated normal maps and opacity maps. If I would have modeled that stuff and then rendered that to texture, it would never have looked as crisp and sharp as if I would have done it in Photoshop. Yeah, I'm doing a little trick here. If you use opacity maps with my shader, then it tends to clip things behind it out. It tends to not show them, like they go invisible when you look through the part with the opacity map, and you can fix that by detaching those polygons and then attaching them again. Oh, and there's a little hole there that I need to close. Okay, so that's fixed also. This is really starting to go somewhere, but I still feel like we've been ignoring the metal for a while. We're gonna have to go back to that and put some more love in there. Checking out some photographs for stuff. I think I'm looking for the exhaust at the moment, seeing if I can find an exhaust picture that's good to work with, or perhaps the springs. Yeah. I'm thinking it'd be a good idea if I change the color of not the spring, the shocks at the front. If they have a darker color, they could stand out more. Could be interesting. It's a small adjustment, but it can make a difference. See, there's just a little bit more contrast there. I felt like too many parts were the same gray tint, so I made a part of them a little bit darker. And I'm seeing a slight problem here also, is that parts of the ambient occlusion map are too dark on those little light fixture things. So I'm just lightening the ambient occlusion map a bit. Just using a white brush with low flow and painting with a white color, so I can just brighten things up a little bit there. So back to my specular map, just having a look if I should change anything here. And you could also just tell if I change my ambient occlusion map, I have to duplicate it everywhere for the color burn layer, the specular, everything. So resaving my specular also, resaving my diffuse. See, that looks better. No more dark burnt out area at the back. It does mean that the red ones at the back, they'll be a little bit brighter where they sit against the fuel tank, but you'll never notice that. Okay, so another thing that needs to happen here is I need to put some color difference on the rear differential. If I'm looking at that big red T Ford that I have it as an example for the red rear axle, there's some color variations in there. So I'm selecting these parts. And why am I selecting these? Because I want to change these into a different color. There we go. Fill that with gray. And looking at this normal map now, I can see some strange distortion here. Look at that. I think my my unwrapping isn't correct here. I must have changed that, scaled that a little bit without changing my unwrapping. So that looks pretty bad. I have to go in and fix that because it looks okay on the model because the baking compensated for the distorted UVs, but it's making it really hard to change the textures. So what am I doing? I'm selecting these parts and I'm just scaling them out like that, and essentially removing the bad parts. But you'll see if I save this now, I'll actually get distortion on my model. This is easier to texture. So anyway, let's just see what this does when I save it. Yeah, first off, I'm selecting these parts because I only want those sort of ridges that come out of the normal map. I only want those ridges to be a gray color. It has to be a combination of red and gray. It might be a little bit hard to imagine what I'm doing here, but just have a look at that reference picture again. I'm trying to replicate that effect. There. That's the sort of thing I want to recreate. So I'm just going to save this as a TGA and see what it does. And there you go, you can see the distortion now. It's distorting my straight line, so wow, I need to fix that. And best way of fixing this is just slightly nudging that single pixel until it sits right. Saving the normals again because I changed those too. And I think it looks fixed now. And I'm putting this in the specular obviously because it's going to be in different specular value again. Brighter specular. There's a little seam at the center there. I forgot some smaller parts. First need to go back to the diffuse. So that part was slightly bleeding into the gray, so I got some red there. We don't want that. Now I'm just going to use a brush and manually paint in those small areas. I'm just going back to the normal map to see what it looks like. Normal map tells me what the correct areas are. There. Okay, I should have a look at that. Yeah, that looks better. I didn't fix the specular yet, so I'm going to have to duplicate that layer back into the specular layer folder. But that might not be something for now. Okay, so I'm just unhiding everything. I'm just having a look at it with all my parts on the wheels also. I think it's really cool to have everything come together like this. Just turn everything back on. Have a look at my car. Yeah, and obviously I need to do the same fixes on my specular like I just mentioned. So that top part, so I don't get any bleeding. Yep, and that seems fixed also. And the smoothing group's giving me some problems there. Not really sure what it is. I'm just gonna leave it at that then. It's a slight smoothing error that I can ignore. Okay, so that's it. See you in the next video where we'll be continuing the body texture.